Can I notepad? Does anybody need anything? Okay.
So right there,
I'll just tell you how I got interested in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I was doing some courses in 1983 at Indiana University, and I didn't have a college degree or anything like that. I was contemplating someday being able to do that. And I finally did. I went back full-time in 85 when I was 33 years old. I was working as a pastor in a small, very dysfunctional church. And I was going to Indiana University, and I also had several other jobs, and I'd quit my job with the bank in order to go back to school. But a couple of years before this, what intrigued me and really made me want to go was in the Indiana University library, I saw a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls, such as they were in 83. I was intrigued about it, and I got into those scrolls. And of course, what was in there was pretty much the conventional scrolls that so many hadn't been released yet. Even at that time, they didn't get released until the 90s. And I didn't see what's the significance of this. So I put it back and kind of forgot it for a while. And what I learned from that little excursion into ancient literature was that most people who are interested in the Bible or are interested in ancient literature or are interested in belief and religion, they get into texts like that and they don't have any guidance. There's no way that they can possibly get into at least the volume I looked at and really get interested in it. I think that it had a community rule, and it had some of the Thanksgiving Psalms in it, and I remember reading them, but there was no significance to it. It just seemed like, well, this is biblical literature, and okay, I put it back and forgot it. And about that time, I also got interested in the Nag Hammadi manuscripts. I think probably about a decade earlier than that, I had seen an ad in some weird magazine. It says, Gnostic Gospels Found, New Vision of Jesus, all this stuff. And I was really intrigued at that. And I thought, these things are sure to be planted by the devil, because what they purported to say didn't seem to connect with what the party line was in the New Testament. Well, I've learned a lot since then. I got a little bit interested in ancient literature then, and a little bit later, when I went back to school full-time, I decided what I wanted to do was study this literature, primarily because one of the quests of my life has been, what's the true faith? I was asked to go to church when I was about 10 years old. I think what was happening at the Baptist church is they were giving Kennedy $50 to the one that invited their friend and to the friend. So, by golly, I wanted that, and the friend that invited me did, but he didn't care much about the junior church and what was going on in that Baptist church, but it's kind of stuck with me. And I had spent plenty of time on the Baptist pew once I got to be 13, getting my fire insurance, policy after policy after policy. What if you died tonight? Do you know that you would go to heaven, or would you go to hell? How many times does an 8 to 13-year-old have to hear that before it becomes ingrained that we have a Heavenly Father that is a despot who is just waiting to get you whenever he can? And at the particular church that I was at that young age, getting off subject, of course. That's what I do. I get off the subject. I was up at the altar a lot because I was afraid, and I was taught that if you were not in a state of sinless perfection when you died, then you were going to go to hell. It was just that simple. It's funny now, full circle, still working in this Baptist church as I was last time I saw you guys, playing the piano. But now I'm not allowed to say anything there anymore. I can play, but I can't say. And the exact same thing's being taught. And I see people are leaving more and more because I think the word is getting out. I think through the Hebrew Roots movement and a lot of post-Christians that this kind of coercion is not at all what either the Heavenly Father wants or the plan of salvation that Yeshua brings through his atonement. Now, that's why I get on a quest to find out about this. I started out being just scared, but I wanted the facts and the truth. So it brings me back to when I was in my 30s. Then I decided to go into the ministry myself, and I went to college. Then a couple of years later, after I picked up the Dead Sea Scrolls full time, first thing I wanted to do was to learn a computer programming language so I could learn how to manipulate text. At that time, there wasn't much for computers. You had to learn a language of some kind in order to process text yourself. There were some programs that did things like that, like Microsoft had some, and Quattro Pro and a few other of these funky programs you never heard of now. But to learn to do your own, to manage text. Okay, so that's the first thing I learned. Then I took the rest of the degree there in a general studies program where you could take anything you wanted. So I took mainly science and computer programming stuff. And then after that, you go to a seminary. My belief was already formed. I felt like an evangelical. I was very assertive in witnessing when I could, but it still scared me to death to bring these things to other people. So what it got to be, by the time I got to doing about my third year as a seminary student, I ended up at Emory in Atlanta. Well, I got interested in the Dead Sea Scrolls through the conspiracy that we were hearing about scholars and churchmen and so forth trying to conceal what could be revolutionary texts about biblical theology. And so I was very interested in this. I started following the conspiracy. I started reading the books of Dr. Robert Eisenman in about 89, 90. He was on the cutting edge of this because he was very vocal about freeing the scrolls. He had this theory that the Morezadek, the teacher of righteousness, that might be the main character in many of the scrolls that we find there. Perhaps the one that's got the sect going was none other than Yahshua's brother, Yaakov James. But he had no way of proving that or getting even close to proof because they had such a hold on these texts, talking about a certain cadre of scholars, primarily Roman Catholic scholars, monastics, monks, etc., churchmen. All the so-called scholars of the Dead Sea Scroll Committee in the early days that came up with what's called the standard model, that Qumran was a monastery and these guys were monks and celibate and all this stuff. came from monks. What they saw in that settlement at Qumran was a monastery, and it had a scriptorium, and it had places for people to stay, and they put their own history into this place, and likewise they put their own history into the scrolls. But the people on this scroll committee were either all Catholic priests, monks, or would-be priests, including the head of the scroll committee was a monastic priest. What's his name? Devaux, okay, Frenchman. No Jews allowed on it. There was one non-Catholic, that was John Allegro, a very colorful person. John Allegro was the writer of the book about Jesus being the sacred mushroom. The sacred mushroom. And the thing about John Allegro is that he felt not a part, because the people on the scroll committee who were actually formulating the theories about what was going on there, what these texts were all about, they left him out because he wasn't in the in crowd. He was at that time a Methodist minister, but they had put him in because of his uncanny ability to translate ancient texts in Aramaic especially, but also in Hebrew. So they put him in. Well, he got tired of being ostracized, so he went public with the theory of conspiracy among the scroll scholars. He did this in 1963 on BBC, and he followed it up several other places, talking about the conspiracy. And by this time, because of what he read in the Dead Sea Scrolls, he came to the conclusion that Yahshua never existed, and that he became an atheist, from being a minister to an atheist. I think primarily for him it was sensationalism, and I think he probably did this in order to get a little more attention for his theory, which was that there never was any messianic movement in or around 30 AD, but rather this is a movement that happened some 100, 150 years earlier, that was then in the first century fabricated by certain government people who wanted to instill religion to keep, instill a religion that all people in Israel and in the Roman Empire could agree on. And, that finally happened in the 4th century, primarily with Eusebian Christianity. So anyway, back to my story here, I was able to get into Emory somehow in my 30s. I already done 2 years of seminary, one at a Roman Catholic seminary in Florida, the other at Quaker. There's a certain accreditation that you have to have in the church I was in, United Methodist Church. There was no Bible school allowed. You couldn't go to Oral Roberts. You couldn't go to Dallas Theological Seminary, any of those. They were strictly by the book. What you needed to do was to find a seminary or a place of university environment where it was ultra-liberal, and that ideas could be exchanged, and that there were no real beliefs foundational to the study of the scripture. All right, you go to a Dallas seminary or some Baptist seminary in Louisville, and you're going to find, well, we believe these particular things, and everything has to fit into this package. So you're not going to get on a scholarship there. Where I wanted to go to Emory or Duke, because it's not like that. There's no foundational beliefs at all. You are expected to accumulate them yourself.
Hello.
Hi, brother. You got a little less hair last time I saw you.
Less hair?
You gained a little bit of weight, too.
Did I?
Yeah.
Brutal. All
What
right.
happens when you come away?
Glad to see you.
I'm really glad to see you.
It's
Yeah.
all muscle.
Well, I'm sure it is. We're going to talk about carrying later on. Carrying.
Carrying.
That's Adam's word for it. He can explain it to you. Which I think it's Adam's. All right. So I was able, reading through Eisenman's books, he was almost like, he was a guiding light to my studies. It really absolutely changed my whole way of thinking for the good, for the better. I've got studying this guy who doesn't believe has increased my belief tenfold, 20-fold. You know what? For some of us, academic belief doesn't lead to doubt. It leads to greater faith because we are discovering things on our own and understanding them in a way that I think is probably Yahweh's choosing of people that can think a certain way and discover these things without losing faith. I think you guys are like that. Definitely. You're probably, since I saw you last, I've been to a lot of groups, and you're certainly the most cerebral I've ever been to. And I guess what I'm saying is that you're more willing to be open to whatever Yahweh puts in your path. That's one of the reasons I wanted to get up here sometime, because I listened to a little of your Dead Sea Scrolls stuff before, and I got to say I was disappointed. I'm sorry, I was disappointed because they are significant. And I want to show you some of the significance that I've got out of them. Well, I get to Emory and I sign up for private study with Carol Newsom. Carol Newsom is now the head of the International Scrolls team. And so I do 2 years of study with her privately in apocalyptic literature and Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm still reading Eisenman and all. Of course, Newsom is with the standard model, which says they were monks and they lived 150 BC and all the nothings from the first century. And Eisenman is just the opposite. He says they're laid. At least some of them are laid and have to do specifically with the Jesus movement, especially in or around 60 to 70 AD. And I've come to believe that there are several of the scrolls that deal specifically with the time frame of 60 to 70 AD. What was happening then? Well, what we have happening then is a Paul splitting off, pretty much going to Europe. Paul could not teach Torah in Europe. Why? Because, first of all, we got to look at who he was trying to teach. We see in Romans 16 succinctly who the people were. In 2 Timothy 4, we see who they were. In Philippians chapter 4 as well, we see who are his friends, and we see that these are high-placed people, high-placed people. He could not teach circumcision or poverty or even celibacy in these areas. It was against the law. There was a law called the Cornelius, Lex Cornelius, okay? So that name sound familiar to you? Cornelius, Acts chapter 10, I think, where Peter goes to the centurion that's so kind and everything. Centurions were murderers. That's why they were centurions, because they had to have the guts to kill one out of every 10 of their troop or legion when the time came for punishment. They had to pick out 1 out of every 10 to kill them as an example to the rest of the legions. I'll tell you another thing that's really been helpful to me is Roman historians. Tacitus, Livy, Dio Cassius, Josephus, he's a Roman historian as well. There are incredible things that are told through these eyewitness reports that were going on in the empire at that time. And I'll tell you something else. These Roman historians are really, if you like, blood and guts and war and survival and feats of adventure. These Roman historians, they have them. I mean, it's fascinating to listen to them. Also, we get so much insight into the New Testament, especially Paul, through the Roman historians who talk about law, who talk about the place of women, who explain, even though they're not believers, who explain why Paul did some of the things he did and why there is such now almost a reaction in our movement against Paul. A lot of the things Paul did, he had to do if he was going to go north, if he was going to go to Europe. Lex Cornelius said you could not mutilate Gentiles. I did it again. You could not mutilate genitals, and they considered circumcision a mutilation. And if you mutilated your genitals or anyone else, you see, my Freudian slip here doesn't want to say that word. Let's see, what would be a better word for that? Private parts. Okay. So you couldn't do that, or you were strangled for that. That you could get strangled. You read in Romans, for instance, where Paul says, Priscilla and Aquila really stuck their necks out for me. That's what it says literally. And indeed, they were doing that, sticking their necks out, because they were preaching a foreign superstition in Greece and in the Roman Empire, Rome proper, which was an act that meant death by strangulation or by decapitation. So when Paul says, they risked their necks for me, I think in Romans 16, he's not kidding. Well, I don't want to get too far into that except to say that if Paul had a commission to go, he had to go. And he couldn't do circumcision, and he couldn't do poverty. And when you know some of the people in his group that he mentions, then you find out that these people were high-placed, senators, druids under the authority of Nero or Claudius, the emperor, the secretary to Nero, his freedman, Epaphroditus, in Philippians chapter 4, who 30 years later was executed under Domitian for, well, it was a foreign superstition because he was a believer, but he was executed for the murder of Nero. What do they call that? Regnicide. Epaphroditus killed by Domitian for an act 30 years earlier where Nero insisted that his secretary kill him because he didn't have the guts to do it himself. We've got Senator, the Druids. We've got somebody named Claudia. We've got Linus, our Druids. We have Herodians, Aristobulus, Eubulus, people we can identify. Aristobulus, who's mentioned both in 2 Timothy 4 and in Romans. Paul says, and to Aristobulus and Greek, my kinsman Herodian. His kinsman Herodian. This might end up about Paul. Herodian was the son of Aristobulus and his wife, who was Salome. Salome, the girl that got John the Baptist's head. Now you wonder why Salome isn't mentioned there when her husband and their child Herod V are mentioned there. She's absent. So we were getting the idea maybe that he doesn't want to mention her for maybe the sake of the tradition of Salome, having been a part of the plot to kill John the Baptist. Various others. If he's going to go, he's got to leave Judaism. So he did. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, it talks about the one who got up in the midst of the assembly and renounced the Torah, for instance. They call him in another place the lying spouter. This is in a text that would, if you want to come back Saturday, we'll talk about, called the Habakkuk Pesher. The Habakkuk Pesher is a commentary on Habakkuk that, well, it tells in detail that anybody can understand the history of the times from about 60 AD to 70 AD. And, you know, as astute students, this was the time when the Jewish war broke out and when Nero had his persecution. Now, I'll say one more thing about Paul, and that is, you know, there are letters of Paul that are not in the scripture, and I believe they're authentic, the letters between him and Seneca. Paul quotes Seneca in his letters about a dozen times, and then other Greek philosophers too. Does he ever quote a rabbi? We like to call him Rav Shaul. He's no rabbi. He never quotes a rabbi. He quotes the master maybe once or twice, just things that like it's better to give than receive, I think, is one of them. Anybody could have said that. But Seneca, a dozen times in these letters, and he has letters to Seneca and from Seneca. And we talk about, when we talk about Revelation, there's a great tribulation mentioned. Okay, the great tribulation historically came to pass between 66 and 70 AD. Or actually a little earlier, about 64, because you remember what's Nero known for? Burned down Rome. And supposedly fiddled while Rome burned. Well, you know, he was up on the top of the palace playing his lyre and singing off key, the fall of Troy or something, I can't remember anymore. But you see Seneca and Paul are talking back and forth in a set of about 8 letters, Paul's letters. You read Seneca, it's just like reading Paul. The other night I did a thing on Seneca, and I was astounded once again as I read some of his moral writings, remembering that Seneca was the guardian of Nero for 13 years as Nero was growing up. Seneca's writing is so much like Paul's, you would swear Paul is writing these things. Seneca was the richest man in the Roman Empire, and he had a monetary scheme up in Britain to cheat the Britons. He cheated them out of land and made lots and lots of money while he wrote all kinds of moral ethics that are very Pauline. Well, in his letters back and forth to Paul, he says to Paul, thank you for the letters to the Romans, Corinthians, and a couple others that we don't have anymore. And he says, I have enjoyed these so much. They're so moral, they're so ethical that I have been reading them to my dear emperor and his wife, Poppaea Sabina. He's reading letters to the Romans to Nero. And he seems not so disposed to them at this point, but I think that if I can win Poppaea, his queen, over, he'll come too. And we'll find him to be more moderate than he has been in the past. Okay. Paul writes back. He says, oh, wait a minute. You're reading them to His Majesty? My dear old friend, I don't think you should do that. I don't think you should do that. Seneca writes back, "That's all right. Don't worry. I know you're being persecuted, but you've got me. I'm going to protect your group from now on, especially you, Paul. I'm going to protect you. I am his guardian. Don't worry about a thing." We got another letter from Seneca. "Well, I've been reading again to our dear queen, and she is quite incensed about your letters, and our king, our Caesar, he's not inclined toward your letters, but I'm going to keep trying. In the meantime, I know that your friends are being persecuted and killed, but one thing I can promise you, as Nero's guardian, I will never let it happen to you." Paul writes back, "Oh my God. No. It's a legal superstition." And Paul writes a letter to the Romans with all kinds of people named without any protection on that letter whatsoever. It's just an open letter, and it is considered to be a genuine letter, the letter to the Romans. Read the Romans from the point of view of Nero. Now, you wonder, where in the world did Nero ever think of Christians? Finally, the letters end up with something like, "Seneca, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?" Nero finally tells Seneca, he says, you've been great. I've made you rich. You've been a wonderful guardian. You've taught me morals. You've become a very influential man in the Roman Empire, and you've lived a long, long life. It's time now to go home and cut your veins. Where's Paul? Paul's hanging out someplace around Rome, I guess, or maybe went to Britain. Probably went to Britain. Seneca has to go cut his veins, kill himself. Then all of a sudden, the fire starts. And Nero's looking for a scapegoat. Where do you think that he got the idea of Christians? They were known as Jews in Rome. Some little pocket of very poor people, Jews and Gentiles mixed together. There were two assemblies in Rome, and at that time. And here we have named in Paul's letters all kinds of people that Nero knows, including his own freedman secretary. And what's he going to do? Just a theory. The Great Tribulation. How does he get the Christians? A superstition. Illegal superstition. You know what happened after that? What does that have to do with the scrolls? Not a darn thing. I just got off on that tangent to try so you could understand the persecution of these believers before they became Christians. They were called Christians in the Roman Empire primarily because there was a guy running around, according to Suetonius, named Chrestus. Chrestus, he was agitating everywhere he went. And another historian, Tacitus, he says, these abominable rat-like people called Christianos or Christianoi or Christianoi. He calls them that. Of course, says in the text that, look, they were first called Christians in Antioch. What Antioch? Well, there's 6, 7 Antiochs, probably the one in a place called Adiabene, where Yeshua writes letters to the king of Adiabene, who writes to him and asks, come and heal me, come and heal me. I'll make this country your country. There's a big Antioch there, and I'm thinking that it's there up by Armenia rather than in Syria. Antioch on the Calaroa, not Antioch on the, what's the other name of the Antioch? On the Orontes. Okay, so our Antioch is probably farther in. And Antioch and Damascus, now we're getting into the scrolls a little bit, just talking off the top of my head. Antioch and Damascus, the two Nazarene movements. Antioch, the movement of the more Pauline type of faith, the more Gentile-oriented evangelistic faith. And then you've got Damascus. The believers of Damascus, the more Jewish, we would say, the more apocalyptic, eschatological, messianic group are in Damascus. It's a funny thing about Damascus. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, Damascus is mentioned continually. They call it the New Covenant in the land of the Damascus, referring to Jeremiah 31 and the New Covenant. This in the land of Damascus. Of course, Damascus, you know, is in Syria. Another funny thing about Damascus is if you put your finger on Jerusalem, put your finger on Damascus, and you look exactly in between the two. And what do you find there? You find Pella. Exactly between, you find Pella, where if you've heard that name, you know that those that were Nazarenes, and I consider the Nazarenes and Essenes to be exactly the same. They were able to flee Rome or Jerusalem before it was destroyed because there was a prophecy that came forth. One called the Olivet prophecy. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, get out of there. And that happened once, and the armies went away, and they got out of there, and the tradition tells us they went to live in the mountains around Pella. They couldn't have lived in Pella because at the same time, all the Greeks in Pella massacred all the Jews there. So they had to live around in the mountains, so we suppose, in this land where they call the whole place the land of Damascus. So we've got in the Dead Sea Scrolls continually the new covenant in the land of Damascus. Now, what does Damascus mean? What does the word mean? Does anybody have a little Aramaic? Blood. Blood? Blood. Okay. Kus. Bloody cup. Damascus is the bloody cup. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, when it talks about the new covenant, like, you know, we got this book called the New Testament, the same word. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's always the new covenant in the land of the bloody cup. What does that remind you of right off the bat? It reminds you of the Eucharist, of course, the bloody cup of Damascus. Are they talking about Damascus? You know, they talk about the province of Damascus, which would include Pella and the Decapolis, that desert area outside, well, I think they call it in the New Testament Perea or Trachonitis. There's two little provinces there. There are a lot of desert there. And you know about the Dead Sea Scrolls people who were in the desert. All right, I'll start out there. So you can see I got interested in this. Before I start there, I just say what happened. Fearless leader there, and I got this jihad going a couple of years ago. And at that time, he was very active in it, and he and I were arguing and talking on the phone. Got to love, you and me, we got to love each other and be friends and stuff. And what happened was, the guy that I'd been following since 1990, Robert Eisenman, he joined. I almost fell off my chair. You know, this guy had taught me so much through his books, James, the Brother of Jesus, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the First Christians, the New Testament Code, Zadokites, Hasmoneans, Christians, a bunch of other things, gobs of books, all with stuff in them that was mind-blowing, but completely reasonable. Completely reasonable. Well, this Robert Eisenman, you know, I told you the Dead Sea Scrolls they were hooked up in the Catholic Church and in museums for 50 years. Scholars couldn't get to them. Many of them, hundreds of them, were never translated. They were assigned but not translated. it became evident in the 1990s that the whole group was anti-Semitic because the head of the International Scrolls team at that time, Harvard professor John Strugnell, did an interview with Biblical Archaeological Review where he made it very clear that the Jews were inferior mud-type people that didn't deserve to have their own scrolls, and that's why we have them. And he talked about Jerusalem becoming a Catholic possession, and New Vatican down there, and all this other anti-Semitic stuff. And so you got an idea right there, 1990, 91, that the Scrolls team head was entirely an anti-Semitic bigot, and so were the rest of them. And he got fired. He got fired. His student got put in, who was my teacher. The point being, now we've got this happening, and we've got Eisenman out doing everything he can to get these scrolls freed up so he can prove that James the Just is the teacher of righteousness, or one of them in the scrolls, and he did prove it as far as I'm concerned. And we've got all this turmoil happening, and we've got some of these translations that the scholars wouldn't let go of, that all of a sudden they're in the black market, they're coming out underground in, what do you call those machines? No, the old kind, mimeograph copies. Like, Galatians says, some of the works of the law. He's talking about some of the works of the law. That isn't found any place but in Galatians and one place in Romans, that phrase. We think, he's talking about the Torah there. And maybe he is, but one of these scholars that wouldn't let his text out that he translated, called Masa Mixat HaTorah, some of the works of the law. That's the name of the text. And he passed this out at a meeting. Qimron, Elisha Qimron, he's still around, still teaching at Hebrew University, but in the Negev, down in the desert, he teaches for a pretty obvious reason in a minute. So he gets his $100,000 for his lecture, and he pulls out his 14 copies of the MMT that talk about some of the works of the law. Some of a very Jamesian kind of story that goes into the story of David a little bit, and it talks about purity, and it talks about some of the very same things the Epistle of James talks about. He passes out his copies. So, all right, one guy in there takes his copy to the bathroom, and he scribbles it out. When he comes back out, he passes his copy back in. Qimron looks through, and his 14 copies are there, and everything's safe, and he can hold these another 10 years and make gobs of money lecturing and passing them out and bringing them back. But then all of a sudden, a little mimeograph magazine comes out of Poland that publishes the MMT, this text, some of the works of the law. And then this little mimeograph magazine of 3 pages ends up in Biblical Archaeological Review, and they decide, we're taking a big chance, we're going to get sued, let's publish it. Let's publish it. They call their Israeli lawyer, because Qimron lives in Israel. What is the most award that he can get when he sues us because we published this, he'll win? They say, 100,000. That's all they can, that's all the damages that he can get. So they go to trial over this. Bar published it. I read it in Bar magazine, 92 or something. I'm just astonished, flipped out about the whole thing, and the trial goes on. And of course, the scholar wins. He wins. He's transferred down into the desert at Hebrew University in the Negev. He gets his $100,000, but that's the end of the $200,000 lectures for him, because this thing is out in the public now. And Eisenman has it.
And it's one of the most controversial pieces of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I won't go into now. If you want to hear about it, I've got all kinds of recordings on these things. It's too boring anyway. Let me see if anybody's on the conference center here. Tommy, you hanging in there? Allison, you hanging in there? Okay. Dwayne's missed the whole lecture because I didn't turn him on. I'm supposed to start at 8 o'clock anyway. So he can go from here. Can you hear me, Dwayne? He called me 3 times today, 2 times. Wanted to make sure to hear this tonight. And there I forgot to turn it on. MMT. Or at the same time here, Eisenman gets the MMT, and he gets on the Huntington Library Board somehow. Overseer of the scrolls at the Huntington Library in California, Southern California University, where he teaches Middle Eastern history and Christian and Islamic origins. And what does he do? You know, sooner becomes the overseer than he said, look, the MMT's out. Let's let them all out. And they did. And then we get his edition, Eisenman's edition of 50 scrolls that have not been published yet. He and Michael Wise, the translator of this edition here, get together and they go ahead and they risk another lawsuit by publishing all these scrolls in a little book. Can't remember the name of it. I got 2 of them at home. But man, it came with the Hebrew. And it came with the translation. And it talked about the pierced Messiah. And it talked about purity issues, the very same ones that are in Acts 15. And in those scrolls, it talked about the atoning death of a Savior. And it talked about the Son of Elohim. And it talked about the Father at the right time sending the Son. And stuff that was just blowing my mind, because here we are getting an alternative and an untouched picture of, if it wasn't Messiah, who could it be? We got people today saying Jesus never existed. They're stupid as cows. You know who your best witness for him is? Your best witness, 1 verse, 1 Thessalonians 1:1. That's your best verse. Everybody says to you, well, I heard he never existed until they made him up after 70 AD. Look at Paul, 1 Thessalonians 1:1, written sometime in the 40s. Here's a man, he knew James, he knew Peter, he knew John. By golly, he knew how to pronounce the name too, because he wrote it in Greek, not with an epsilon, but with an eta as the second letter. But we're not going to go into that because I promise not to be controversial. Okay, so look what happened to Eisenman. He comes into the Ahad and he says to us, you, after all these thousands of students I've had, you guys are the only ones in all these years that are doing something with this. That was exciting. This was like the angel Eureka coming down from heaven. In a way, I knew this guy from reading these books over and over and studying it, and the ones that he recommended, and here he was in the Ahad, still is. Be seeing him down in Georgia. We're going to be doing some lectures together out in Tulsa this October. It's amazing, and he sends over 250 or 300 first edition books, as you recall. Some of you got those books, and still out there. Lee and I dug up money for postage, hundreds of dollars, sent out 300 books free of charge. Or if you could help, you could send a little donation in, trying to get the message out.
Of course, you send out 300, you might get 3 people interested in something free, but that's okay because those 3 people I know now. And some of them, like a guy named Matthew Mosier, wrote a book based on his conception of Eisenman's footnotes, which he sent to Eisenman to look over. And Eisenman stole these notes and published them under his own name. This just happened. Matthew Mosier. He's one unhappy dude. He's going to meet me out there in Tulsa. I said, come on out. You talk to him yourself.
Robert Eisenman guy sounds like a top-notch dude.
Well, look, he's in his 80s now, and he's a little, he's getting a little bit. I'll put my hand over the mic. You might hear this.
What's the book you were talking about that you sent out? The Robert Eisenman book that you got a bunch of copies.
New Testament Code and the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem's a real interesting book because he wrote this book when he was in the 60s, from 1964 to 1967 during the war. He was in Jerusalem. And he wrote these memoirs and poems and prophecies and all this stuff before he got into any of this other stuff. And he took all this stuff in 67 and put it up on the shelf. Then in 2014, he took it off the shelf, never looked at it, gave it to the publisher. He said, publish it just as it is. That's the New Jerusalem. It's an incredible book. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of a hero worshiper, even though he's a crotchety, mean old man, and I owe him money. But I owe him $125. He insisted that I pay postage for those books. I paid the postage, but he lost the check, a year ago. So I'm still paying him for all that postage. That's why I'm going to take a collection tonight, because I need to pay him back. But let's see. So now we've got him, and now we can study him. Can't talk to you now. See, what time is it? I've been going an hour. How long can I go? A half hour? Okay. A half hour. All right. Well, I've done enough of that, conspiracy and stuff. I thought, well, I'm not going to have enough information here to make this worthwhile. But that's one of the reasons I enjoy going off the subject so much. Oh, let me tell you about my brother. Nah. My brother. Oh, no. Jack, don't even go.
Okay.
All right. I did the standard model, the conspiracy. There is a conspiracy. Spend a penny. You read one of the most interesting books you ever read. It's called The Dead Sea Scroll Deception. Yes, this book's been panned everywhere. It's panned. People hate it. Scholars hate it. Everybody hates it. Critics hate it. I loved it. Because the ones that hate it so much don't know anything about these texts. And you read that, it is a Dead Sea Scrolls Deception, 1 cent. Oh, you've got to pay postage at Amazon, $3.99. But if you'll send me $15, I'll see that you get one. A used copy. Used, acceptable. So let's see here. So the Dead Sea Scrolls Deception. This is a vast conspiracy, but now there are still scrolls that are being published, still being translated and coming out, and that's why this edition of Wise's translation is about twice as big as the one that came 5 years before. I think this is 2005. I expect another edition out at any time, but what's left over, a lot of lacunae, holes in texts, and it's really hard to piece together. But let's take a look just a minute at the beginning of the way. And I think what I want to start with, I've got a recording here of a text that was actually found before the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's called the CD, or Cairo Damascus. Nowadays they're just calling it the Cairo, the C.
Generally, it's called the Damascus document. A piece of this document was found in the Cairo Geniza. A Geniza is a place where they take old scrolls and stuff when they're used up and put them away, so they won't be
Used anymore. Destroyed.
well, yeah, I'm thinking of.
They're honored. Like,
Yeah, well, it's just like the what do you call it when you go in and
Scroll grid.
throw urinal inside of a church? Desecrated.
yeah.
Yeah, they won't be desecrated. They put them away. So in tombs and different things. Thank you. Let's take a 19-minute break.
19 minutes.
No way.
Are you gonna play a recording of that?
I'll play a little bit of it.
Really break it.
What's significant about it? Are you gonna tell us after we hear it?
Oh, I'll tell you right now. I'm going to read. First thing that's significant about it is in the 9th century. A piece of this Damascus document was found in the Cairo Geniza in the 9th century. You've heard of the Karaites, right?
Yep.
Okay, Karaites, a lot like us. Karaites got a hold of this piece of what we call today the Zadokite fragment. It was a piece of this document that told of the origination of a sect of priests that were expelled from the temple. The priests were of the house and family of David's Jebusite priest Zadok. And you might remember in Kings and in Ezekiel that David and Yahweh prophesied that the house of Zadok would be priests forever. That includes their calendar, because in Ezekiel 44, it mentions calendar there. So what happened was when the Maccabees came in 165, to get rid of the Greeks, they also got rid of the priesthood that had been going 1,600 years, a righteous priesthood, and the Zadokite priests were massacred and they left. Some of them went to Egypt, where they went to the king of Egypt, and they said, "Look, we want to put a new Jerusalem right here in Egypt and make a temple to Yahweh." Ptolemy, Philopater, Ptolemy, King Ptolemy, he said, "Sure, I hate those Greeks. Yes, let's build a temple to Yahweh here." So they built a temple to Yahweh, and that went on at the same time the Jerusalem temple did, in a place called Heliopolis, which is prophesied in Isaiah chapter 19. Take a look sometime, the city of the sun or the city of destruction, depending on what translation you have. If you want to know what's going on right now, I think in prophecy, Isaiah 18, 19. That's about as close as you can get, because there are historical markers right now for those particular areas. Now, let's see. All right, so half the Zadokites went to Egypt, to Heliopolis. That's where they came from in the first place, from Pharaoh Akhenaten's reign, 1350 BC. The rest of them went to the desert of Syria, Perea, the land of the bloody cup. They're wandering in the wilderness, trying to figure out what to do with themselves. What do a bunch of priests and their allies do out in the desert? What do they do? How do they eat? How do they make a living? How do they feed their children? Exodus out of Jerusalem. They all had to go because they were being killed by second generation and third generation Maccabees, who took over the priesthood themselves. What do? Well, just think of that a minute. In the Damascus document, we get a little bit of their history at the very beginning. And rather than read it, maybe I will read it.
Nah, I've already got it read. I'll just play a little of it. And we'll see if you can hear it. Okay. You're going to get the story of beginnings.
This is the exhortation from the
It's not really loud
Damascus
enough, is it?
document. Listen, all you who recognize righteousness.
It's not going to be loud
Consider
enough.
The deeds of
Okay.
Elohim. When he has a dispute with any mortal, he passes judgment on those who spurn him. For when Israel abandoned him by being faithless, he turned away from them and from his sanctuary and gave them up to the sword. But when he called to mind the covenant he made with their forefathers, he left a remnant for Israel and did not allow them to be exterminated. In the era of wrath, 390 years at the time he handed them over to the power of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon.
Look, there's some time mentioned here. The handing over to Nebuchadnezzar, 390 years. Some say, well, that's just something used from the Old Testament, but it works out just about perfect. Now the story begins 390 years later.
He took care of them and caused to grow from Israel and from Aaron a root of planting to inherit his land and to grow fat on the good produce of his soil. They considered their iniquity, and they knew that they were guilty men, and had been like the blind, and like those groping for the way, 20 years. But Elohim could
20 years. Now they're expelled, they're groping for the way. Later on, we hear that they are in this wilderness of Perea. They talk about the way, preparing the way, make his path straight. Exactly the same cry that John the Baptist and Yeshua, they say, "Shuv, shuv, for the reign of Yahweh is nigh." This is exactly what's happening here. They're in the desert making a way. Also, way in Acts chapter 9. Isn't that what the Acts group called themselves? The way, speaking of the way in the desert, the way, make his path straight. All right, this is exactly what's happening in the desert. Now, they're out there.
considered their deeds, that they had sought him with a whole heart. So he raised up for them a teacher of righteousness.
And there he is, Moreh Sedek. They raised up for him as they wandered in the desert, considering their sins and repenting for 20 years. I wonder what they did 20 years. The theory is that they became robbers. What else could they do? It was okay, according to the Temple Scroll, the Dead Sea Scrolls, to rob Gentiles. If the leader said you could, but you couldn't rob Jews. But if the leader said you could rob Gentiles. Right? So maybe that's what they did. It wasn't a sin for them. But here they're waiting 20 years, they walk around, and here he comes, Moreh Tzedek, a teacher of righteousness.
What 20-year period was it?
Well, it's a good question. It's completely a matter of theory. But what is said is we've got a 390-year space, and we have a historical marker of Nebuchadnezzar. Let me see.
Now, is the 390 years, because I know the kingdoms of Israel and Judah lasted for exactly 390 years from the beginning to the exile. So you're saying that the scrolls are talking about a 390-year period from Nebuchadnezzar to some other point?
What I'm thinking is, now there are different views on this. One is just exactly what you said. It is a substitute or it's a number that is significant and used. You know how they do in the Bible, they take different time periods, like, David ruled 40 years, Solomon ruled 40 years, that kind of thing. Symbolic. Another camp says that it was
literal. So literally, what do you do with that? If you've got, say, let's see, 506 BC,
586.
86 is the
Exile.
exile. I'm trying to think of what 503. There are a lot of different dates that are mentioned for, let's see. Okay, 586. Israel was before 200 years before that, right? Okay, so 586. Add 390. Who's a mathematician here? See what, I've never done this. Let's see what it comes out to. Well, when you add it, when you're in BC.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
No, that's right. You're still good. 586 plus, that's, you just either have to do negative minus
Yeah,
or plus,
gotta-
positive plus.
Yeah, it's a minus minus.
So it's 976 BC. Is what it would be.
Go the other way. See, if you're at 580 something BC and you're talking about time,
Right.
you got to do minus minus. Well, yeah.
196.
No.
Okay.
It's the same way. It's the same. I'm the mathematician in this room. Okay.
Yeah, I know it is. So
So no, you're right. You got it right. If you do, it's gonna
If you're going forward, it'd be
586.
146. right?
one,
586 plus 390. It's gonna be the same as negative 586 minus 390.
so what's the bottom line? I know we know you're smart after all.
No. So the number you got 586 plus 390 is 976. Yeah. So 976 BCE, which does get you.
No, wait a minute.
That's going backwards.
We're going the wrong
If you're
way
going
here.
forward,
Or
it's
you're wanting to see what it is
146
for.
AD.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. He said what?
176, then you said, right? Or 196
186 minus
586.
130.
plus 390.
Plus
No, I'm sorry, minus
586 minus 390.
146.
I'm completely confused.
390. No, 390.
196.
Couldn't plenty.
586 minus 390.
This is my diabetes medicine.
196.
196 BC?
Yes.
80.
80.
80.
No, one.
Uh-uh.
If
No,
you're
it's
going
BC.
forward from
Okay.
586, you're going forward
No.
390 years.
You're going to be about
586
107.
BC.
Oh, I see. Gotta
Yes.
subtract that
Plus
one. You're right.
390
It's
years
still
is
BC.
196 BC.
It's still BC. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so what does it come out to?
196
196
BC.
What about that number? I
Now just
forgot.
square that.
What does it mean?
You divide it by pi. No, it's
Oh, I love pies. Cherry or apple?
Pi or round? What happened at that time was a revolt in Israel against the seated priesthood. The high priest was assassinated. He finally ended up in the high priest assassinated in 174 BC or 171. The new high priest took over. The high priest who was assassinated, he was called Onias III. You've heard of Honi the circle drawer? No? One of Jesus' relatives. He a rainmaker. In 171, Onias III is murdered. He's expelled in about 177. Murdered in 171, his brother. This is kind of like a Beatles song. Her name was McGill, but she called herself Lil, but everyone knew her as Nancy. We've got his successor is his brother, who comes in with the name of Yeshua. They Greekify his name, Jason. He goes in as Onias IV, and then is expelled. And then what happens? I already told you. Onias IV, Jason, Yeshua, he goes to Egypt. The rest of those guys, allies and the other Zadokite priests, I don't know why, they go the other way to Syria to start getting the land of the bloody cup. That happens right then. So add 20 years to that, and what do you get?
You get
The other way.
176 or
All right, you're right there. It puts you right there. I never did that before, but it works out great. Thank you. Now I know. The mystery's history here. They're out in the desert groping around, and then they're looking at their sins. They're repenting, probably stealing stuff or living off other people. And then all of a sudden, kaboom! Teacher of righteousness comes to lead them into all truth and give them a direction to go in. What did they take with them from Jerusalem? They're not allowed to take anything but one thing, the scrolls. They take the sacred books out of the temple because they were their books. They were their books. They take the sacred scrolls out of the temple, and they take, in the next, sometime in the next 200 years, they bury these guys. They bury them because either one of two things have happened. There's a prediction in the Dead Sea Scrolls by the Moreh Zedek that in 40 years, they are going to be invaded by the Kittim. Well, Kittim is a word that originally meant Cyprus, but came to mean the enemies of Israel. Speaking, Kittim speaks of, at first Greece, but that's long past. Greece is come and gone. Now it's the Romans, or the Kittim. So we got this prophecy of 40 years given by the teacher of righteousness. Now we know that if Onias IV was a teacher of righteousness, if he was, and some propound that he was, we've got another one later. Because Rome invaded in 63, I think, BC, but Jerusalem wasn't destroyed. It was captivated. Because the Maccabees called the Romans in. And the Roman influence had been there ever since the Maccabees. Which Maccabee? Jason? Which Maccabee? Jonathan Hyrcanus. He called in the Romans to help him with the Greeks, and the Romans never left. They finally invaded in 63 BC, and they invaded again in 70 AD. Now, the prediction is, of course, we can look it up if you want, but I want to not keep you all night here, because I want to spend plenty of time telling you stupid jokes and telling you how I got carjacked last night to High Point. Let's see. So there's a 40-year prediction in the scrolls to the Kittim come. Maybe there was a Moreh Zedek at that time that made that prediction. It didn't seem like it was possibly going to happen because the Greek started to wane out and they all thought that Kittim was the Greek. But wonder of wonders, in 63 BC, 40 years after this teacher of righteousness made this prediction, Rome invades. Now take a look. Yahshua HaMashiach, in his Olivet Discourse, he talks about the end. The end, the day of Yahweh, is not in the future. That happened already. That happened in 70 AD. Somewhere around 30. The rapture? What about the rapture? That happened. Look in your Bible and see Revelation 6 and 14. It happened. Happened in the first century. It was witnessed. Second coming, it happened. It's got to come a third time.
What was the rapture that happened? Who went up?
With the 144,000, they had to die. People today say, well, we're in the 144,000. Or we're priests after the order of Melchizedek. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous, proud, prideful.
I'm going to come against it as much as I can. And John, you're going to help me one of these days.
I believe it's 288,000.
Well, okay. Yeah, I know. You and I, we could, you would always beat me though, because we start out from different places, and I submit. Just go ahead and beat me. I don't care. I got away with my life last night, and my rental car, but I didn't get away with my money. No, he got my money. Yahshua says this generation will live to see it all. Revelation chapter 1 says, those who pierced him will see him and mourn. He says various times, behold, I come quickly. I come soon. How in the world can those that pierced him, as the Dead Sea Scrolls talks about the pierced Messiah, how are they going to see him if they're all dead? They're dead now. They can't see him. Where are they? These people that pierced him up on a cloud, or are they going to view him from hell when he comes back again, or what? They're dead. The Revelator knows exactly what he's talking about. They're still there. In 70 AD, 40 years after this prophecy, they're in Jerusalem waiting to be destroyed, and they are. That's it's a horrible story, but it's a wonderful story because we don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. Yeah, the sky might fall. That's all right. But it won't be the revelation because that's done. This generation will live to see it all. What is a biblical generation? It's 40 years. 40 years of King David, 40 years of Solomon, 40 years across the wilderness, 40 days where in the desert, tempted by Satan, 40 days in the desert. Oh, we're getting into Dead Sea Scroll literature again. However, that generation of 40 years, it come to pass with the day of Yahweh in 70 AD, Jerusalem is entirely destroyed. And that's when you read the prophets that say that the day of Yahweh is the destruction of Jerusalem, and especially the temple, and it's still not there, and it never will be again. But look, we've got in the Dead Sea Scrolls a 40-year prediction, and the Romans came. If that prediction is not the same as the one Yeshua made. Now, the ones that say it was early in the 1st century BC, how can they know? They don't know anybody that was a teacher of righteousness 40 years before 63 BC when Rome invaded Jerusalem. Besides, Rome left Jerusalem at that time. What's the possibility of Yeshua's prediction and this teacher of righteousness predicting the same thing at the same time and being the same person? Now, I'll let you in on one other thing here, and I'll let you go. There is a rule. I have a group called Yahad. Yahad. There, I say Yahad because it's just easier for everybody. Y-A-H-A-D. We went official in January. We got elders, deacons now, groups all over the place. And this radio show has done an incredible thing for this movement. And it's based on what we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls, because I believe with my whole heart after all this time of studying that what we're finding in these books here are exactly the same movement as we call the Nazarene movement. In fact, you can look in the church fathers and you get the same kind of equation. I'm trying to show other people what it is. Now, not all these books have to do with Essenes. They never call themselves Essenes. Essene comes from the word in Hebrew, oseh, which means something like doing Torah. Remember James in Acts chapter 21, Paul's visiting. Is that 21? Paul's visiting, and Paul tries to tell all the things that he's doing. And the elders from James, they say, look at all these thousands that are here zealous for the Torah. Zealous for the Torah. We call the people in here now zealots, because the later Essenes, a section of them became zealots against Rome, and we're going to fight Rome. We'll get into that tomorrow if you want to. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. Okay. So we got Vero Essene Yahad right now. We've got a document in the Dead Sea Scrolls called the Community Rule, except they don't call it that anymore. They call it something real dumb. They changed all the names of these. Now, I use old names that I've known for all these years, and trying to look in one of these books, the names are all different. They call it Charter of a Jewish Sectarian Association. What kind of a name for an ancient text is that? Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Serek HaYahad. Okay, it's a community rule. It's what I always knew it as. And community, Yahad means community or togetherness or unity. I found it one place in the Old Testament, but they use it exclusively in these Dead Sea Scrolls to talk about what their fellowship is and where they fellowship. The community rule, they say, well, we got all kinds of variations on this in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's 13 copies of the Yahad rule. The Yahad rule is a document that tells people how to live in community together. I don't know if you've ever lived in community with people for any long period of time, but you're going to find out that so-and-so is going to be in the toilet the same time the other person wants to be in the toilet. You're going to have to resolve that, or there's going to be a toilet war. Honestly. There's a rule, okay? Mabel, you go to the toilet at 6, and you go to the toilet at 6:05, something like that. And that's pretty much what these rules are about, except this is a society that you have to go through an initiation to get in there in the first place. Once you get in, you go by the community rule. 13 copies. So-called scholars, especially these standard model scholars, if that's what they are, we should call them job keepers. I want to keep my tenure. I'm not going to rock any boat. Yes, I'm going to stay with the same thing these monks believed about these scrolls when they kept them for 50 years from us even looking at them. Yes, this is called the standard model. We call them the consensus. There is still a conspiracy going on to lead us astray as to where these things came from and what dates they are. Okay, there's 13 of these Yahad rules. They say, oh, they're so confused about this. They're all different. They're all different. Look, they're confused people. They got scribes there. Some of them write it this way, some write it the other way. Look, there's some kind of schism. Yes, this one writes this writes the other thing. We can't believe this stuff. We can't think it has anything to do with Christianity, even though we have a book that's exactly like it called the Didache, or the teaching of Jesus Christ to the 12. They didn't read the first line of the Yahad rule. It says, the rule is to be changed with every new people and the times they're living in. The rule is to be changed. And it's like, I don't know, first paragraph of the Yahad rule, in the exhortation portion of it. What's happening here? When you take carbon dating, so remember, carbon dating has nothing to do when a text was written. It cannot tell you when a text is written. It can only tell you when the thing it was written on may or may not have
Existed. Been created.
what would it be? You know, if it's say it's a vellum or something, it's a sheepskin or something like that. When the thing died?
It tells you the amount of carbon remaining in it to give you the half-life to be able to ascertain the approximate age of whatever that material is.
Okay, so that starts happening when the thing dies, right?
Right. The carbon-14 starts decaying as soon as it dies.
Okay. I got some paper that I still use. It's probably 40 years old. I got books in my library that are manuscript books that are real old. They've never been written in. But through carbon dating, what I do agree with on the community rule, these 13 copies or 12 copies, I can't remember exactly what now, is that there's a little bit difference from each one. What's happening here is the rule is changing, just like it says it's supposed to change. With new people, new times, new teachers, new situation. You've got to change.
Second edition, third edition, fourth.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Thank you. We've got additions there. I have heard people say, well, that's against the scripture because we've got one Torah and it's perfect. Well, if I could tell you about that and convince you in an instant, I believe. Well, I'm not going to get into that. No controversy. These are editions of the same document that's been changed for times and people. And what that tells us or implies is there's a different teacher coming on time after time. So when we say that there's a teacher that gives a prophecy of 40 years before the Kittim come and destroy everything, and say that happened in 63, and then we've got one that happened in 70 after 40 years of Messiah telling us that the same thing is going to happen during that time, there's no reason why there couldn't be two. The Moreh Zedek, he became, take the Pope. He became an office that when one died or was incapacitated, the next one. Tells us in there that the next one would be the most astute in the community and elected. These are elected after the first one that came, and you predicted somewhere around 190, 180, 170 BC, where we know that the Zadokites got kicked out of Israel. Am I making any sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so we move into the first century, and we have, through the church fathers, certain documents that do exactly the same thing as the community rule. One I mentioned is the Didache. One is the Epistula Apostolorum, the Epistle of the Apostles, who were the epistles? Well, they were married to the apostles. We have the same thing, rules for the community of living. And this is something that is, to me, extraordinarily interesting, because what we have, if we take away the books here that are violent, because we know Jesus was a complete pacifist, a limp-wristed biscuit of a man that he never said, go get yourself a sword. He never went into the filthy, wretched place, scourging animals, throwing over. He never went before Pilate and just kept his mouth shut because he knew what truth was and Pilate was looking at it. This is the man Jesus. That's who I'm looking for right now because I want the real thing. This is the only place to look these days. I read in church history how the church destroyed. How Diocletian
destroyed, 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 religious manuscripts of every kind. And we say Jesus never wrote anything when we do have at least one letter from him, and that Paul never had any other letters when we have several others that are claimed to him, and the ones in our Bible, 6 of them aren't his. So we have to look for a new paradigm here. If we're going to get down to the bottom of this, if we want to, well, some of us do. We can stay in the status quo. We're not going to hell or anything. We don't have to worry about that. But this is a time that another book that they tried to destroy, the Epistle of Barnabas, tells us this is the time of the millennium. He tells us distinctly that he's living in the 5th millennium. Same thing the Dead Sea Scrolls say. And that Jerusalem's been destroyed. And that he's trying to put together the Nazarene movement again. And he tells us when Yahweh or the Creator or Yaldabaoth or whoever it is takes up a perfected world and does something with it. At the end of the 8th day, a new world. Look, 6 days have passed in that scheme of things. Barnabas, I believe, is an authentic text. The Catholic Church took it out of the Bible. It was in the Bible. He took it out. It's too Jewish. And now you read commentaries on the internet. It's too Essene. It's too Jewish. But at the same time, it abrogates the Sabbath. It abrogates the food ordinances. It makes Christianity happen right after the destruction of the Romans. The last several chapters are nothing but Torah laws. And do they come out of Deuteronomy in the Bible? No. They come out of the Temple Scroll. No. That's something we need to look at right there. It gets controversial. If Barnabas quotes laws from Torah and they're not in Deuteronomy, but they're in the Temple Scroll, what's he looking at? What about the rest of the literature at that time? 1st century, 2nd century literature. Collect the sayings out of that literature, Jewish literature, Christian literature that are attributed to Torah. See if you can find them in Deuteronomy. Chances are you won't. Go look in the Temple Scroll. That's where they'll be. You said they took their books with them out of the temple, the sacred books. Who took over the temple in the 1st century BC? The Pharisees became the priests, who are called seekers of smooth things, false scribes, lying spouters. Whitewashed tombs, exact language in the scrolls. Whitewashed tombs. And we think of Yeshua right now in our Hebrew roots groups today. We're getting 2 refrigerators and wearing the Greek hat on our heads. You know, what are we looking at here? Rabbinical Judaism as our model? That stuff is anti what we're looking for. It's anti. They've changed everything. The Masoretic text, they've changed everything. We need to be looking at origins, I think, in this way because it's all we got. Or get ourselves another refrigerator. I'm thinking of the B'nai Joseph movement right now. An impossible contradiction. You know what I'm talking about? B'nai Yosef. We're a bunch of wannabe Jews that we want to make friends with Jews and we're going to have fellowship and get all together and be pally and wear our Greek hats and get us some refrigerators, you know, and not put a piece of cheese on a hamburger. Never will work. Complete contradiction. So I just leave you with this. We're trying to find origins. I know you're working hard at this too. We work at it in our own way because this is a calling in our lives. We wouldn't be in this movement where we have every kind of persecution from everywhere if it wasn't.
if it wasn't. We find both in the scrolls and in Matthew 5 about the persecuted. Rejoice, it says. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. I don't know about you. I know about some of you, but I'm alienated from my family entirely, with the exception of my mother that pretends, pretends I'm not a cult leader or some kind of heretic, and is so ashamed of me in front of her Christian friends, even though I go to church 3 times a week. Still ashamed. Jack, we want you to play the piano in this church, but we don't want you to say any more. I said, Pastor, I'm only telling the historical background. You keep your mouth shut. This is a Baptist church, and we're not interested in history. We're interested in Baptist theology. That's what I was told. I'm under your authority. Sure.
So they're using you, basically.
Huh?
So they're using you, basically.
Oh, but they're paying me. I need the money bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Usually.
I'm running an international movement now with nobody paying anything in. I'm just expected to pay for everything, which that's all right. If it's to go, it'll go. But I'm getting used to the persecution, as are you, I'm sure. But it always is going to hurt. It's always going to be a sacrifice. And even what hurts the worst is within your own group. When somebody turns on you, or there's a misunderstanding, or there's an immaturity of some type, what can you do? The only thing you can do is tolerate, leave them behind, continue on the quest, and pray that something will bring them back to you, or there'll be a reconciliation, or in the very end, in the resurrection of the dead, everything's going to be all right then. The only difference is you're going to be 4th dimensional. They're going to be 3.
Is this question and answer time?
John 5. No questions, because I'm too scared.
Okay.
Can you tell us what you're going to do tomorrow night?
I'm done.
What you're going to do tomorrow?
Well, here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to actually get into the scrolls. If you don't want to come back tomorrow night, that's okay, because I'll just go to bed or something, or go out and get drunk. If you want to get drunk with me, I don't get drunk. I'll just go out. I got the phone number of the guy that hijacked my car. Call him and get some heroin.
There you go.
Yeah. This is part of the mystique of this radio show,
This is the community rule. This is the tendency to be.
Some people have called us the drinking, cussing, carousing, gambling Essenes.
There you go.
I feel like I've heard you read that Damascus document before, that recording several times, but when you stop and fill in the context and how you think it fits, I feel like you kind of stopped that. So you only played a little bit. But
Yep. Tomorrow night, what I want to do is give samples.
Okay, I'm really interested in, because it's like you said at the beginning, just kind of reading it on my own and not having all that context.
You don't have
all
the
that
context.
history. It's not. It's hard.
It doesn't make any sense, but you don't see what's unique about them. You got to know the New Testament. You got to know Paul. And some scholars can help you, and some, like the top scholars, like James Vanderkam, will set you back. Will set you back. He must be hired to throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing. Honest to goodness. I just finished his Dead Sea Scrolls book again, and
He did. He's one of the ones that was the editor of that Hebrew grammar that I have. The basics of biblical Hebrew.
that'd be all right.
Miles Van Pelt. No, never mind. No, I'm thinking.
Another van, but not.
No, yeah, it's Miles
I
Van.
haven't heard him doing a Hebrew grammar, but it's possible. He's a Dead Sea Scrolls consensus scholar, and
Does he have a book with like a greenish color? It's about yay thick.
Done several of them.
Okay.
Do I have one here? I might have one here.
Um,
I read his book so I know what's not the case.
So the Dead Sea Scrolls one that you have there, you have the one that's like the yellow and gold filled, one that Wise translated with like 3 other people, Wise, Cook, and
Right here.
else. Right, because I have one that's like that, but it's not. It's like a different color. It's got, you know what I'm talking about? Is it the same?
It's a different edition.
Okay.
They
Oh,
did.
the earlier one.
They redid some of the translations.
That
So-
one, does that still go from, I know the way they organized that one is they went from the front, was the most complete scroll, all the way to the back was the most fragmented.
It might be because what they do here, Actually.
Like the Damascus document.
yeah, they put the biggies up front, but
Okay.
then they go by siglum
Okay.
after that. Go to 1Q, 4Q.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to get into the scrolls a little bit with some quotes just to show you and see the context of it. But another thing that I think is extremely important is Cave 7. Cave 7. Cave 7 had a scroll jar in it. It says Roma on it. There was a bunch of fragments of Greek texts. The consensus scholars used computers they took the letters from all these fragments and they tried to find out what is this Greek texts here in these pile of fragments. Okay, so they can't find any. The closest they could find was a text from Enoch 103. That doesn't match at all. But there are like 7 little fragments. One of them is a piece of dirt with scroll ink on it, and a couple of them have a reverse side. All right, somebody got the bright idea. Why don't I run the New Testament on these fragments? Oh, this raises stink.
What do you mean run the New Testament? Like see if it's something from the New Testament in those
Yeah.
fragments? Is that
Like
what
map
you mean?
them over.
Yeah.
Over
Okay.
place.
And then you run the letters through a computer. See what the other ones did? They said, the scrolls are from the 2nd, 3rd century BC. There's not going to be anything but Septuagint or some old apocalypse in there. They didn't do the New Testament. Well, O'Callaghan did, 1972, and Karsten Peter Thiede is another one that worked on this. And what do they find there? Well, he found a fragment from Romans, 1 Timothy. You ought to see what the fragment from 1 Timothy is that they found in there. It is about our time. It's so weird. 1 Timothy, Romans, Philippians, Mark, matched up in the computer. These 7 fragments. I got pictures of them. We can look at them even, and we can read the Greek letters on there. It's pretty simple. This is still an area of outcry. Now, they can't be New Testament Paul letters for a couple reasons. First of all, those scrolls were buried before 68, and everybody knows 1 Timothy was written way into the 2nd century. That can't be right. I looked in the textbook. It says right there, 1 Timothy, in my New Testament thing up there. 1 Timothy was written in the middle of the 1st century, 2nd century. It can't be in there. Romans can't be in there, for crying out loud. There's a better chance of that. But how can that possibly be? They wouldn't be reading Paul in the Qumran Essenes. Mark? Well, Mark was written way after 70 AD. It talks about Jerusalem being destroyed in Mark.
And that had to be written afterwards. And since the scrolls were buried in no later than 68, this can't be. Can't be because Swinburne's New Testament commentary says that these texts were written way off in the 2nd century someplace. All right, let's dismiss this. Let's persecute these guys. Anybody can see it for themselves. We've got New Testament documents in Cave 7 in a jar that says Rome on it. Read Vanderkam on that. Oh, no. It's 1 Enoch 103. There's only 8 letters that are wrong. Or, oh, no, we can never find them. We can never find them. It's some kind of literature we've never seen before.
How big are these fragments?
Small.
Like some have only a letter on them or something?
2, 3 letters.
These are found as one section or just tiny little things, whatever?
There's a pile of them
Okay.
in there.
So that's one of the things I would like to hear more about from a scroll perspective, as a whole.
You're up on this stuff, yeah. But
Just because of like I said, when you look at Wise's translations and you get back to the back end of those things, and you take what they have, and you can actually look at the biblical scrolls, the one they found that are of I know that ONU guy posted on his website links to, you can download the biblical scrolls in a PDF and you can see them for yourself. And some of them are just like 2 letters on an entire line, but Wise and them fill in the blanks with this entire verse,
yeah.
whatever it is. And if it's from something that's not found anywhere else, let's just say it's from like something that like the Damascus document, right? That there's not like a copy of it in whatever, right? This is where they found it. How do they know to compare that to like what
all right,
the translation is?
What they use is a couple of methods. Equidistant letter spacing. It's like when you've got Courier font. All the letters are the same. Well, what do you call it when they're not equidistance? There's a name for that. Monotype's equidistance. There's about any other font, they have a size. So they take what they got, and like they'll have a fragment with letters on both sides, maybe 12 letters on both sides, and they will measure those letters. And so what they'll do, especially when they got a piece that's on the side of a page, you've got a straight edge there, they can measure, for instance, there are 2 pieces. One's got a side, and I think the other one's got a side, or they got something matching there. So they do an equidistance letter thing. They know how wide the page was. And when they do that, the 2 lines or 3 lines, or a reverse and obverse, match up with the letter spacings. For instance, you've got a piece of Romans, possibly, on one side of the page. You do letter spacings and see what's on the other side of the page, knowing the size of that page. And if it matches up, and it doesn't match anything else in the world, then I think you got a pretty good piece of information there. It might not be, but that would be a huge coincidence.
But that's comparing it to an existing document, right? So, like, what do you compare? I can't come up with.
Well, what do you mean?
Right now, yeah. So, like, let's just say I'm an illustrative person, so maybe you can illustrate with my mental.
Okay.
Here. So let's say you open up a jar, right, and there's just a pile of scrap.
That's right.
Which is not uncommon from my understanding, right?
Not at all.
They pile of these old ancient things. So they spread all these things out on a table, flat, whatever, right? So, with the examples that you gave, maybe they found one with the equidistant spacing, and it's the book of Romans, something that they have to reference against. Deuteronomy, Genesis, something that they know to have an existing document to go against. But if it's something like the Damascus document, that's not copied anywhere else, it's only found in Qumran, or it's the Thanksgiving scrolls, or whatever it may be, how do they get this fragment of the Thanksgiving thing, and then down here, they piece it, and then everything that's between there's no duplicate anywhere in the world. They somehow come up with a translation of this between this and this. How do they do that? That's where I want to speak to Michael Wise and just have him speaking to him like,
Sure.
How you came up with that translation? What made you?
You look at old pictures. I'm not sure I trust his translation. I talked to Eisenman about him, and well, there's a little bit of a skeleton there. We'll talk about it sometime, but you look at old pictures of them. Well, sometimes the old pictures are in the basement of the Rockefeller Museum in Jordan. What used to be in Jordan, it's in Israel now. And a big table laid out, glass sheets, and you see these guys taking piles of this crap and jigsaw puzzling it, trying to find edges. Now, these 7 fragments are fragments from Cave 7. The fortunate thing about it, the unfortunate thing, there's so much missing. The fortunate thing is they've got an end of a page.
Right.
And they got another end of the page, and they got a couple that fit together. And as I said, they scramble this. When they're able to get the stuff,
They had 50 years.
That's right. Well, that's the thing, what's been manipulated. What?
Technology keeps advancing, so they're able to.
Yeah.
Here's a good example of how I know of a particular section that I can understand how they piece together. And I can't remember the name of the scroll, so forgive me what the name of it is. But they have like a section in there where it's going through the positions of the holy days as it relates to particular days of the month through the entire cycle of the year, right? And it's this whole, whatever thing. And it's like, starting in the first month during the course of said priest, on the 4th day is the blah, 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 Feast of Tabernacle. And then it keeps going through, but it's fragmented here and there. However, those pieces that are fragmented in this part of this sheet are not fragmented down here. So they know what that was supposed to say because it says it here and it's the same pattern of words, right? Yeah, so that makes sense to me.
Or they use the Bible
Right,
a lot of times.
Yeah, but right. No, you're right. The verses you're talking about, they and Dead Sea Scroll.
Yeah.
People that wrote. Yes, you're right. They reference scripture or something, then it can go back and say totally makes sense. They put it here. But I know, isn't the Temple Scroll one of the most highly fragmented ones?
No,
There's a lot in there.
it's not. It's one of the most
When I first
intact
started
ones.
reading, I was like, well, how's this any different from Deuteronomy? Because there's a lot in there.
It's hugely different.
Well, but at the beginning.
Yeah, 613 laws. There are 1,500 laws in the Temple Scroll, but the Temple Scroll is the longest scroll, 24 foot long, something like that, and least fragmented. There's just when you get down to bigamy, then all of a sudden it's ripped off. It just gets down and says something about bigamy, and it's not permitted among the Essenes. I wonder sometimes myself, like he uses couple words, divine beings. What would he be translating there? Elohim? Divine beings. Why doesn't he say Elohim or gods or something like that? Divine beings. But I don't know how they do that except, but you remember the first translation that came out, how that worked it was not Wise, but Abegg and Cook at Hebrew University in Cincinnati. What they did is something very smart back in the 80s or 90s. They took the scrolls that the scrolls weren't published, but what was published was a concordance. Okay, they gave you words in order, alphabetic order, and said what book that was in and how many times it was in there. And what Abegg and Cook did on their Apple IIe is wrote a program that would take that concordance and put it back together again. So the first published version of the Dead Sea Scrolls, these two guys put it in their Apple IIe computer and spit out a facsimile representative copy of everything that wasn't published but was translated then. Now that's genius. That was the first one, and all of a sudden everybody's translating them. And I don't know what happened to that. I'd like to get a hold of that. Abegg and Cook, that's got to be 85. You know, you remember the computers back then. I was playing with a Apple IIe and a Wang and a Macintosh. Apple
And a Commodore 64.
Commodore. Yeah, you had a VIC-20? That was a cool system. I did a show on all the old computers I've used since '78. That was kind of fun to remember all that stuff. I just got into it early.
So can I ask a conspiracy question?
Yeah.
I'm just me asking. It's not him. You didn't forbid me from asking. So I know that only you, and you probably don't think it's a theory anymore, but the
I don't think it is.
Deuteronomy ending is not proper, but it's supposed to be the temple scroll at the end of it, right? Or maybe
Deuteronomy is completely bogus.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Okay. So
Like the Old Testament Deuteronomy?
It's completely redone.
Yeah. Anyway, so
And only I believe that he proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
okay, so assuming that's correct,
Uh-huh.
how has he, if he has, explained the enormous multicultural, centennial conspiracy that must have happened to cause the Samaritan, the Peshitta, the Septuagint, the Masoretic text, all of them to, in large respects, have the exact same Deuteronomy across the span of 400 years, and that spawned from different cultures, some of them that vehemently opposed and hated the other cultures, like the Samaritans versus the Jews. How are all of those holy writings amongst those people have basically the same Deuteronomy, and then suddenly it's not right? So how did all these people come together? Did they all conspire together and say we all want to deceive the nations? And
that's a really, really good question. I have thought some about that, especially in regards to Karaites, because as it turns out, the Masoretic text is based in large part now on a Karaite text, is the Ben Asher Codex or something like that. But I'm going to see him next week because he's teaching down in Georgia. We're having a conference there, and the boy has become a man in many respects. You know, been working with him for 2 years. He's got a photographic memory. And when we had him at the last boot camp, he was the epitome of adult, sane, gentle, great teacher. It's amazing because I'm not answering your question, but because, you know, we dealt with this guy
no, I know what you're talking about.
a long time ago. He was, and he's still pretty mature on social media, immature on social media, but in person, that guy absolutely enthralled the whole group there when we met up on the Tennessee mountain back in May. We were there for a week. He built a following there. He did great. I got all his recordings. I screened them all. I threatened him. I paid his way. Down here to Georgia. He has no money whatsoever. I got him a benefactor to help him. But the guy, I will talk to him about that. In fact, I'll probably send that to him tonight and maybe have an answer tomorrow. I would, because he knows all those. He's got a doggone.
He's got a 222 book canon. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? Right?
Well, the only thing you can do is not have any canon, like me.
Well, see, that's a good point. It's like I have a study written on my website, which some may not agree with completely, but about how I view canon in general.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, you can read
Maybe
it.
I have read it.
You might have. Basically, my understanding, the study's called "What is the Word of Yahweh." I did something similar to that. Was on that message at the feast last year? 2 years ago. 2 years ago. What did I do? No, 2 years ago was the Israel cycle. Last year it was something similar to that. I can't remember what I ended up getting into, but basically that there's a way to distinguish what the word of Yahweh is from others, and sometimes I feel we hold these ancient authors that never intended to be writing the very words of Yahweh up to a scale that they never intended to.
Man, you hit it right on the head.
Like, if somebody were to read my study 2,000 years from now, I wouldn't want them to interpret.
You're the
it.
teacher of righteousness then.
Good gosh.
They say, well,
You wouldn't
look
want
it's somebody named Adam. He's got this library of books. Look, these must be holy books. Look, there's
15,
Portnoy's complaint.
15 statement of belief. This is the only thing you're supposed to do.
50 Shades of Grey. Look, this is their sexual practices of the cult. Yeah. Well, I'm done. Thank you.
One last question.
Yeah.
So if Deuteronomy in your mind is bogus, is there a equivalent kind of book that lays out Yahweh's commandments?
Yeah.
Which is what?
The Temple Scroll. I'm not saying that it's bogus. I'm saying that the ancients used something else. And because if we collect the sayings from ancient texts from, say, about 100 BC up until 100 AD, lots of text there. Go through there and say, Torah says, or Yahweh says in the Torah. You take those sayings out, make a list of them where they're from. And you can't find them anywhere in the Torah that you have. The way he proved this was he found them all in the Temple Scroll. I have, if you want that, I send you his commentary on it. I have not been able to investigate myself that I've been too busy. I read his commentary. And I have noticed that before, that this book says Torah.
Even books in the canon, nice scriptures, say the Torah says this.
What does the Nazarene Act say about it?
About the Torah?
The Nazarene Act say that certain ones got a hold of it and messed it all up, and I believe that. I'm talking about the Clementines.
Isn't there somewhere, didn't it talk about the book of the law too?
Right, so that's another theory that I have, and this is just a theory, so I'm speaking of, that the book of the law that we know of, and maybe this is what you're getting to, Patty, the book of the law, the scroll of the Torah, is a completely independent document from what we have now in the 5 books of Moses, meaning that the information contained in the 5 books of Moses isn't necessarily any less inspired per se, or contain the true historical background of Israel and so forth, but that when he said he put the scroll of the Torah in the side of the Ark of the Covenant, that it was a list of commands. It wasn't intended to be, now the flesh around those commands is what we now know as Genesis, and the context of Exodus, and the stories of moving through in Numbers and so forth. But the books, the law itself, where the people, where the king was supposed to make a copy for himself, that was supposed to write, wasn't Genesis through Deuteronomy as we know it now. It was the book of the laws of the Torah that he was supposed to study and understand. This is how you govern.
Yeah.
That's a theory. That don't have.
It's a good
Well,
theory.
I know when Odie was talking about that, he basically, from what I understood, was that Deuteronomy was almost like a condensed version. That they said that people won't care about this or that, or this won't make sense,
Right.
or this is not necessary. So that's where you have so many more laws in the Temple Scroll because of the redactors or whoever, put together Deuteronomy.
They try to
We're
do the
almost
Cliff Notes select.
summarizing.
Yeah, kind of like that with no bigamy dysregulation. The oldest Torah that we have is called the Shapira. Now, it is estimated that Torah is from approximately 800 BC. It is radically different. The 10 Commandments are 7 commandments.
What are they about?
I've got on my
They just put
website
'em-
I,
combine them.
anything that if you get interested. I got now about 500 hours of shows on here on all this stuff, including the Shapiro strips, and on my website I got pictures of them.
Where were these from?
They were found in the Dead Sea area, a little farther south. They were found in the 19th century by Shapiro. What was his first name? Well, it doesn't make a difference. It's a sad story. Marcus Allegro, John Marco Allegro, restored this text. It's disappeared. They didn't know anything about Dead Sea Scrolls at that time, and the head theologian in Germany said, this is a fake. We know there are 10 commandments. And this leather this could never hold up, the whole thing. This couldn't possibly be. So he called it a fake. Shapiro, who found it, and tried to get them to look at it. He killed himself over it. He was made a complete fool. Nobody do business with him anymore. Even his daughter left him. Because these so-called scholars called this scroll, this leather, I don't know if you'd call it a scroll. It was like a leather piece of licorice or something like that, found out in the desert. He was an antiquities dealer. They didn't believe him, but when they got the Dead Sea Scrolls, they're seeing paleo that looks a lot like that, and they're re-looking at it again, and what happened to that piece of leather is it was sold at auction, and nobody knows what happens. However,
How complete was the Shapiro Torah that they found?
well, I got the whole thing.
They've got Genesis through what?
There's only one book. It's the Book of the Law.
Oh, okay.
And it's, I have it on my website, like the Temple Scroll. This is not a Moses thing. This is directly to the people. In Deuteronomy, everything's through Moses. But the scroll people, they see Aaron as the main guy because he's the priest. And so in the Shapira, go out to jspresents.org. It's a short recording. You can listen to it, or on my website, I got pictures of it and a transcript of the Hebrew on it. If you want to look at it. Seven
Commandments. The whole thing's translated?
Yeah.
How long is it?
Well, you want to hear just a hair of it?
No. How long is the entire? Can we read
Yeah.
Shapiro online somewhere in a document?
Yeah, on my website. I don't think you'll find it anywhere else. I had a struggle trying to find Allegro's little book on this, the Shapiro Affair. I finally found this rare book on eBay for $9. I just scarfed it up.
jspresents.org.
Or you can look at the actual Shapiro strips. The pictures are from the 19th century on my website that I haven't touched for years. I'll give you a link. I would really like you to take a look at the Hebrew of this. I don't know any Hebrew. And see what you think.
Your website, this particular website looks like the Drudge Report.
Yeah,
A
it's
list of links and links.
Yeah, it's all my stuff, but I haven't touched it for 5 years, and it's stuff
like your archive.
I started it there in the 90s. So, there's Web 101 clear on up to really advanced website modifications like iframe.
The oldest core not in existence dash the Superior manuscript 850 BC. Is that the one?
850 BC. Estimate.
Oh, so this is the recording though.
All right. Well, I'll get you the link.
Okay, cool.
It should be on the front page of JS or jacksonsnyder.org. Here it is. Well, a picture of it. It's at, well, you want me to send it to you in a text or email?
Yeah, just shoot it to me in an email.
All right.
And can you send that
It's a
to me?
long-
Find it?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you guys for coming. I enjoyed your company. Didn't get any fights or anything. That was a good thing.
No
There's no
fights.
blood or anything. It would've been-
Yeah, no tomato.
There's a reason we still have a home fellowship after 10 years because we don't kill each other.
Yeah, I was kind of having a nightmare that Patty and I were going to be fighting and swinging and wrestling on the floor or something.
She is the most violent one of all.
Yeah, I know she is.
They-
That's funny.
I've got stuff up there. If you want snacks on the.
No.
I
You're-
got some of your lemonade.
You're best at Gmail, not
Did you get
Citrix,
mine?
right? Citrix is your.
Is it cold enough? Yeah, you want- I've got snacks. I'll put it
I do want to hear about the carjacking.
small.
out. Come on up.
The carjacking?
Yeah, what's happening with this?
I'll tell you about it. I've been a little bit hesitant, but I want sensation. I'm like these. Yeah, I want to be sensational. Get the message out. Because you'll be talking about Dead Sea Scrolls sometime, and then you'll say, "Oh, and he got carjacked right here in North Carolina."
And then we'll go off on a topic of
I
our
almost got
brother.
carjacked in North Carolina.
I'll bet you did.
I have one you miss.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I haven't had one since I was 10 years old.
Absolutely. Have a whole bunch of them.
Good and plenty. It's been a minute.
Your coffee. Ooh, Spain.
Is this
Coffee
Jackson
that
Snyder
bites back.
coffee?
I'll have to tell you about this. I'll leave it till tomorrow. I'll do a commercial on it. You never had coffee like this, I guarantee you. Especially Sting. See that Sting?
I saw that.
You
Where'd
drink
you
a
buy
cup of that coffee and you're good for 10 hours. It's triple roasted beans. I pick out exotic beans from the Tampa coffee market, roasting, triple roasted with the finest guarana in there and loads of it. So when you drink a cup of this coffee, you're going to say this is the best tasting coffee you've ever had. I drink coffee everywhere to see. But you're going to say, wow, man.
Is
Wow,
it
give me
caffeinated?
another. Caffeinated isn't the word for it. Not only caffeine, but 6 or 7 other natural stimulants in there.
This is a detoxifier.
Wow.
But it's supposed to be coffee. I'm gonna go with the
Caffeine
Sting
sensitive.
instead.
This is the best. I picked this coffee out green.
It doesn't go through monkeys or anything, right?
No,
Oh, I remember that.
monkey.
You've heard about the coffee that goes through monkeys.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about it anymore.
You're coming up?
Yeah, I'm coming up. I just need to shut things down here. Hey, look at you guys. Thanks for hanging in. I'll tell you about the carjacking later on. Got carjacked last night. Got my life back. My wallet's quite a bit lighter. I can tell you that. And I visited all kinds of oddball places as I was being run around High Point, North Carolina at 80 and 90 miles an hour in a tiny little Toyota Varis or something like that. We're going to do it. We're going to rent us one of those when we get together next time. Maybe we'll do it up in Tennessee. We'll get one of those tiny little Toyotas and we'll go flying 80 miles an hour up and down those hills and stuff. That's going to be fun. See you later.